So I don't want to overdo the polling discussions. We've only been talking about polling like every couple of weeks recently, but there are some really interesting things going on in the polls that make me want to talk about it again today. Joe Biden has again had another really bad week in polling. He keeps dropping, and the beneficiary this week of Biden dropping in the polls has been Elizabeth Warren rather than some of the other historical beneficiaries, like, for example, Bernie Sanders. Elizabeth Warren is climbing again and actually starting to close in on Bernie Sanders at the national level. So let's look at a few different things here. Our video audience watching on our TV affiliates or Free Speech TV or on YouTube will see the polling data represented visually on screen. You will see that the trajectory of Joe Biden's polling started with Biden pre-announcement polling in the mid to high 20s and then spiking to more than 40% average in national polls after he formally announced that, yes, he's running for president. But then it started to not look so good. Joe Biden trailing off from like that 41, 42% mark down to about 38%, which I told you about at the time. He continued trailing off to around 35 and a half or 36. He started this week down even further, around 33 or 34 in the polls. And Joe Biden has had another really bad 5 days. And he's now down to 32 on average, including a low of 27% in one particular recent poll from The Economist and YouGov. Now, earlier on, you'll notice it was Bernie Sanders who was benefiting from Biden's drop. In other words, about 6 weeks ago, Bernie's gains were matching Joe Biden's drop very closely, with a little bit of the Biden drop going elsewhere. But in the last 10 days or so, Biden has continued to drop, but Bernie has stayed pretty even. And it's actually been Elizabeth Warren benefiting from the loss of Joe Biden, and slightly Pete Buttigieg, who has been climbing as Joe Biden continues to falter. This has been a very solid week for Elizabeth Warren. She's now more solidly into the double digits, averaging about 11% in the national polls. And as I said a month ago, Elizabeth Warren had been picking up on average 1 to 1.5 percentage points per month. If she continues this into the debates, she could, and the key word is could be in a position to actually overtake Bernie Sanders. And later on in the program today, I'm going to address an audience question which wants to know whether Bernie and Warren are potentially going to sort of just split the progressive vote and maybe hurt the progressive movement in the long term. I'll talk about that later on in the program. The question for Elizabeth Warren as the debates start will be, is she going to be better prepared for these debates than she has in prior circumstances? And maybe preparation is not the right word. She's just not a great debater, right? I love Elizabeth Warren's policy-focused town halls. I love the detailed campaign policy proposals that she has released. I love the campaign she's running. But I recognize that on a debate stage with, I don't know how if it's going to be 9 candidates on each of the two, they're splitting the first 2 debates into 2 groups because there are so many Democratic candidates. I don't know if Elizabeth Warren on a stage with 8 other people is going to do well in a way that is actually going to help her polling, because I just don't think that's the best sort of setting for her. So this is national polling. Let's look at a couple of other things, including Iowa, because meanwhile in Iowa, Joe Biden is now barely leading at all. Biden is holding an average lead of just 5 points in Iowa over Bernie Sanders, with a margin of error somewhere between 3 and 4 typically. That is not particularly good for Joe Biden. So I believe that Iowa is effectively up for grabs. I don't mean Biden is losing as of today. What I mean is it's close enough and far away enough. It's the polling is close enough and the caucus is far away enough that the debates could actually push Iowa to Bernie Sanders, or even potentially to somebody else, depending on how the debates go. Looking at New Hampshire, not surprisingly, New Hampshire has a different sort of theme. New Hampshire Democrats are more establishment centrist than Iowa caucus goers, maybe, and Joe Biden has a larger lead there. He's plus 13 in New Hampshire. Iowa is the first caucus. The New Hampshire primary comes after that. So there are a couple of different views on these polls and on the 2020 primary. One view is it's over. If you look at June of the year before the election, historically, the leader in June of the year before the election usually ends up being the nominee, meaning it's Biden and that's it. That's one view, okay? The other view is this thing is totally wide open. Anyone can win this and it's still early. I think neither view is probably the right one here. It is not wide open, but there is still certainly a chance for one of the other front runners to win. Historically, there have been moments in June of the year before the election where you have one candidate polling 60% and then a bunch of other people in the single digits. That is not the situation this year. You have Joe Biden dropping and only leading Bernie Sanders by a much more modest amount right now. And you have multiple candidates in double digits, certainly now Biden, Sanders, and Warren. And that could even change with Buttigieg or maybe even Harris as the debates get going. So I do think that there is an opportunity here for it to be somebody other than Joe Biden. I know that there are some people emailing me who say things like, David, nothing that has happened in the past matters this time around because everything is different. Trump as president, as the status quo, is so different than anything that has happened before. The leftward swing of Democratic voters is like nothing that we've ever seen before. Every election this happens. Every election there's a contingent that says nothing from the past matters because this time it's so different. I think that these are new circumstances, but anybody who's polling under 1% is done. Okay. I know people are emailing me, even saying that people like Beto are about to surge drastically as soon as the debates start. I don't think so. And he's polling like 3 or 4%. But if you're polling under 1%, I mean, the dynamics are not so different this year that, you know, I get emails from people saying Tulsi is going to so dominate the debates that she'll be leading after the second debate. No, she won't. Okay. Beto is not all of a sudden going to take the lead. He should go back to Texas and run against Senator Cornyn there. I think he's got a better shot. It is possible for someone from the top 3, the top 4, maybe the top 5 who could pull into the lead and ultimately take this nomination. Historically, it's most likely to be Bernie or Biden. Okay. Given where the polls are now, given how these primaries have gone, basically every time in history, it's going to be Biden or Bernie most likely. And there is like a 99% certainty that it will be Biden, Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, or Harris. Okay. If you're outside of that group, I don't see how you ultimately take this nomination. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't support someone outside of that group if that's who you want to see win. I believe that a diverse primary is a good thing. I believe that you should support whoever is most aligned with your values and on the issues. What I am telling you in terms of a historical analysis is that it is extraordinarily unlikely that anyone outside of the current top 5 ultimately is the nominee. If you disagree with me, tell me either how am I misunderstanding the current data, or how is the historical context not relevant to what is going on this particular time? Let me know. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and it's a good one. It's a good one this week. Today's sponsor is Skillshare, and I'm excited to tell you that everybody in our audience is getting 2 entire months of free access to Skillshare when you click the link underneath this video. Skillshare is the site that offers over 25,000 online courses on almost any topic you can imagine: cooking, meditation, photography, video editing, Photoshop, managing a small business, almost an endless list. And whether you're trying to get ahead in your career, maybe you want to learn new skills that will make you better at your job, you might just be exploring a new hobby and you're trying to find new ways to be creative in your personal time, Skillshare's the perfect place to fully immerse yourself in whatever you're trying to learn. I really enjoyed the class on more advanced video editing techniques because it's something I've been wanting to improve at, but have been very busy hosting the David Pakman Show for the last few years. Once again, the David Pakman Show is giving you 2 whole months of access to every single class offered by Skillshare. After those 2 months, if you want to keep your subscription, Skillshare's super affordable at less than $10 a month. Get better at whatever it is that you're passionate about, or discover something brand new that you didn't even know that you would love, and join Skillshare's other 7 million users by clicking the link underneath this video.